pre-exposure prophylaxis. Pre-exposure prophylaxis, as we call it, is data is now starting to roll in from phase 3 trials. The Purpose 1 data came in July at the International AIDS Conference, highlighting that the drug was safe and very effective in preventing HIV in women. And data from Purpose 2 is now out, which is particularly important for transgender men, individuals who identify as transgender across different binaries. It also, very importantly, shows that it can reduce HIV infection in men who have sex with men. More data is going to be released on Purpose 3 and 4, particularly Purpose 4 will cover people who use drugs. So as we can see that phase 3 trial data is now available on Lenacapavir to show that it can play a very important role in reducing new infections and providing a very good, effective regimen for those who want to prevent HIV and are HIV negative, but facing a high risk of the virus. So I just wanted to highlight that. It's a long-acting injectable. That means you take it twice a year. That offers privacy, and it offers an option that can be used by people who are extremely marginalized without actually sharing the fact that they are at high risk, whether it is women or men who have sex with men or people who use drugs. So at this point of time, with the data that's come in from Purpose 2, it's very clear that regulatory filing for PrEP will start in high-income countries, perhaps roll into low and middle-income countries from Gilead. And of course, WHO will convene its guideline committees to look at Lenacapavir as an important tool for HIV prevention. So I welcome everybody. Today's press briefing is not only on the importance of Lenacapavir, but also efforts to prevent a monopoly on the drug in India, particularly through patent claims that will grant Gilead a monopoly and allow it to control not only the finished formulations, but also the raw materials across the world. So as we all know, India is a very key producer of HIV medicines, both in terms of finished formulations, but also in terms of API that is exported to Thailand, Brazil, and other countries who produce HIV medicines. And therefore, the patent challenges in India have a direct impact on the rest of the developing world. So I welcome everybody to the press briefing. We will try and keep the intervention short and open the floor for questions and ask everybody to line up the questions, perhaps in chat as well, so we can queue it up. The first speaker I would like to introduce is Pratibha Seva. She used to work for the Lawyers Collective and now is working in Third World Network, an organization that has not only been involved in providing technical support to low and middle income countries in very important trade negotiations at the World Health Assembly, the pandemic treaty, but lesser known work of Third World Network is to provide technical support on patent challenges in low and middle income countries. They have supported patent challenges in Indonesia and a number of other countries, including Philippines, for example, and of course, India. So I'm going to welcome Pratibha Seva as the first speaker. The second speaker is a stalwart of the HIV movement, Mr. Eldred Tellis. He first started off setting up Sankalp Rehabilitation Trust when numbers of HIV were escalating in India in the 90s. And he set up the first harm reduction services for people who use drugs in India, both in the Northeast, the interventions that were set up in the Northeast. He lived and worked there quite closely to set up harm reduction interventions, and then set up Sankalp Rehabilitation Trust to offer harm reduction and also link people who use drugs on the streets of Mumbai to the HIV program and prevention services. He's played a stellar role in India's HIV prevention program and continues to work with the HIV program NACO and with stakeholders I'm sorry, Lata, I'll just increase the volume. Is this clearer, Lata? Well, I hope it's clearer. Yeah. So I hope the volume is better now, and I'm very sorry about that. But I would just like to highlight and welcome Eldred Tellis. And Eldred Tellis, of course, we know has played a very important role in India's HIV prevention program, particularly for drug users. He is the petitioner on some of the patent challenges, patent application. He's the petitioner on oppositions to the patent claims filed by Gilead, and he's the second speaker. And I'll just hand over to Pratibha to start the briefing. So over to you, Pratibha.
Thank you, Lina.
Just to confirm with everybody, you can hear us?
Hello.
Maybe Rajnia, you can confirm that you can hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you well, yes.
Okay, go ahead, Pratibha.
So, Gilead has filed around 5 patent applications for Lenacapavir. Of these, 2 of them are for salts and crystals. One is a markush, and the other is a compound, and the third is an injectable composition. And regarding the salts and crystals, what we know is that salts and crystals are generally crystal forms are generally used for increasing solubility, that is, which allows it to pass through your stomach and intestine, or to increase the shelf life. So these are the salts and crystals are something which we already know. People in the pharmaceutical field already know how to make it, what are the initial ingredients, what is the process. So people in the pharmaceutical field are well aware of these salt making processes and why it is used. Secondly, as far as Indian law is concerned, the patentability criteria is at a really high. For instance, one of the key patentability criteria is inventive step, which says that the invention should have a technical advance as compared to what is existing knowledge. So what is already known. So here, salts and crystals are provide no technical advance, especially in the salts that are used for Lenacapavir. They are known for their solubility and stability and other qualities for which salts are used for. And secondly, so they don't actually provide any technical advance to the pharmaceutical field. And thirdly, we have 3D, which is an important criteria for determining secondary patents, which are these all secondary patents. So 3D says that you cannot patent anything, any new forms of known substances unless they show some enhancement in efficacy. And here, as far as here there is a new form. Salts and crystals are all new forms of known drug, that is Lenacapavir. And Gilead has not provided any data proving enhanced efficacy. And lastly, we know that Indian Supreme Court, it was very famous, the Gleevec case. Indian Supreme Court itself has rejected patent for beta crystal form of imatinib mesylate. Last year, the Indian Patent Office also rejected the bedaquiline fumarate salt of in March 2023. So all these are very key factors which say that the Gilead is trying to, if granted, or if all these patents are granted, then the monopoly would extend to 2038, which will be a serious impact, which will have a serious impact on people who are seeking this drug, and which will affect their, not just in India, but many in other countries also who depend on Indian generics for this medicine. So this is a serious concern that we have. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Pratibha. And there'll be some technical questions. Thank you so much. So Eldred, over to you. Perhaps, highlighting why you took the important step of becoming petitioner in this very important HIV drug that is now going to be looked at from from the angles of using for prevention. Yeah.
Thank you, Lena. Yeah, I'm basically representing the marginalized group of injecting drug users. And I have been working with this group since 41 years. And as most of you will know, most of the marginalized populations are among the very poor. And in Mumbai and major cities, we have people who are completely marginalized and they can't even afford their basic meals, let alone being able to afford high-priced drugs. So from that point of view, we feel that they need to be safeguarded because that is one of the very quick ways of spread of HIV. And in fact, we have knowledge that a lot of the new infections are being amongst people who inject drugs, continues to be in pockets of people who inject drugs. So from that point of view, it becomes of primary interest to us because we at Sankalp Rehabilitation Trust want to look after the clients in every way possible. It's not just the harm reduction, it's not just the prevention and treatment. We look at them holistically. And to be able to take this forward, we have to make sure that, the various problems that occur along with HIV are also taken care of. And that is why Sankalp has particular interest in drugs related to HIV, as well as drugs related to hepatitis C and TB, which are the common infections amongst the injecting drug users. So in that sense, Sankalp is very keen to promote a quality of life among the clientele and make sure that this is not spread. Because in Manipur, we know in the past also, it spreads very fast from the drug users to their sexual partners. Even if their sexual partners are, not having multiple partners, but it's just the fact that being married to somebody who injects drugs and infected makes them vulnerable. So it's like it's a continuous kind of infection, line of infection that takes place. And we also believe that PrEP would be very useful, especially we don't have to, as Lena was saying, it's purpose 4, we don't have data on trials, but we know that in this group, if we could use, especially the long-acting form of the drug, twice a year injectable, it will be highly useful amongst our population because very often you find the street drug users, they don't have that basic discipline of the regular you and me. So we need to actually take care of that and make sure that while we're treating them for other problems that may occur, that HIV is not one more added. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eldred. Particularly, UNAIDS has clearly outlined that long-acting injectables, long-acting technologies like pre-exposure prophylaxis will play a major role in preventing new infections in the coming years. That includes all marginalized communities, and data is now very, very positive. And, I've included the links for Purpose 1, for example, from the WHO, who highlights that they've been waiting for Purpose 2 to start the whole guideline issue, and then I can send that link to anybody who wants it. So I'm just going to go straight to the questions that people have put in the chat. So the first question is from Lata Jishnu, and she said, has Gilead licensed that drug in India or started negotiations with generic companies here? Well, Gilead hasn't outlined its access strategy very, very clearly. It hasn't put out a price. For example, it hasn't started registration, for example, even for treatment. It has mentioned that it would consider a voluntary license with Indian generic companies. And there is a major concern, which is twofold. One, that the licenses are bilateral and not through the medicines patent pool that ensures better licensing conditions. And a greater coverage of low and middle income countries. So that's the first concern that we have, that Gilead is refusing to negotiate via the MPP. The second concern, of course, we have is that voluntary licenses, like in the case of tenofovir, have tried to block the export of raw material to countries like Brazil and Thailand who have capacity to produce these drugs. So voluntary licenses often don't cover upper middle income countries, and we know that India has not only significant capacity for finished formulations, but actually for raw materials as well. So we have some of the most important API producers for HIV medicines in India, and they provide raw materials to upper middle income countries. And there's a major concern that the voluntary license will not cover export of API and not allow export of API, in fact. So I just wanted to answer that. If there's a follow-up question to that, Lata, I open it to you before I go to Sumi's question. Okay. So the second question is from Sumi from the print, and she said, need to understand whether Gilead has a patent in India on Lenacapavir already on the molecule. If yes, till which year? Currently, Gilead does not, none of the patent claims made by Gilead have been granted by the Indian Patent Office. All 5 applications have been challenged by different groups on merits. One of the first ones, which is a Markush claim, and anybody who follows the Indian Patent Office will know that a lot of claims are made on Markush, which is a lot of compounds in one particular application, and there are weaknesses that exist in these patent claims, and one of them is the failure to disclose, and the patent system's entire ethos is based on sufficient disclosure. So some of these applications have major weaknesses, and those weaknesses have been raised on grounds of patentability by Indian civil society, including the Delhi Network of Positive People. So none of the 5 patent applications have been granted, and all of them are under opposition, Sumi, and predominantly because of the concern that long-acting technologies like cabotegravir were very slow to reach low and middle income countries. There's a supply shortage, the prices are too high, and therefore Indian civil society worked with technical partners to challenge all 5 patent applications, both on grounds of public health, but also on the technicalities that are available as grounds of opposition under the Indian Patent Act. And Sumi, you're welcome to ask any follow-up question. Yeah. Yeah. Please explain the patent status of the drug. Is it a preventive or a therapeutic? It is both. It is currently registered by FDA as a drug for drug-resistant HIV. And as I mentioned, the phase 3 trials, Purpose 1, Purpose 2, Purpose 3, Purpose 4. Purpose 1 and Purpose 2 clearly highlights that data showing that it's effective as a PrEP drug, both in men and women, particularly marginalized ones as well, both transgender and men who have sex with men, and of course, women as well. So yes, it's the data is moving towards regulatory filing for it to be registered as PrEP as well. So those aspects are relating to the regulatory process and not to the patent status. So just trying to explain that. And also, yes, the price from Gilead is $44,000 currently in high-income countries. So, it's a twice-a-year injection, which is $44,000. Andrew Hill and his team at the University of Liverpool have highlighted, based on the cost of API and other costs, they've highlighted that the cost of production plus profits, reasonable profits, would be $100 per patient per year. So 2 injections per patient per year, mass produced in India could cost us as less as $100. And if it is scaled up then it could go down to $40 per patient, per person per year, not patient, per person per year. Yes. Yes, Banjot's question, I think there's a question from Anuradha, and then we have to, yeah. Yes, so there was a talk about bringing down the price of the drug at the AIDS conference. Any headway on that? I think this is the headway we are trying to make. The study that showed that it can be mass produced by Indian companies. Indian companies have already developed the raw materials. They have capacity sterile facilities and can produce the injectable. And therefore, the generic of Lenacapavir can be mass produced at less than, $100 per person per year. So the patent challenges are a direct response for generic competition. Yes. And I would like to go back to a patentability question. Yeah, of course, Anuradha, Gilead has been promising that, but we know that the most effective way of bringing down prices is generic competition. So we would prefer not to rely on very high access prices that pharma corporations offer, as in the case of CAB-LA, the pricing that's been offered has not been even offered to middle-income countries. The access price is restricted. It's quite high and it's restricted to low-income countries. So we would prefer the generic competition, and that's what UNAIDS and others have asked for, generic competition from India to be opened up, and that's the demand from across technical stakeholders as well as Indian civil society and people who need PrEP. Yeah. Yes, Lenacapavir is not available at the moment, not even as a treatment for drug-resistant HIV in India. As you all know, that regulatory filings in low and middle-income countries are way behind high-income countries. They're called regulatory lag, and we are hoping that one of the Indian generic companies will file for registration soon. So yeah, there's a question from Banjot that.
Hi, Banjot. Gilead has been saying that in their Markush, they have not, in their Markush patent application, they have not disclosed, just like Lena said, they have not disclosed Lenacapavir. So they, in their salt and crystal forms, Lenacapavir is disclosed. So that is the first time it has been disclosed. Therefore, it is novel and inventive. Whereas we already know that if in Markush, once Markush is filed, all the compounds that are in that falls within the Markush structure stands disclosed. That is the basic law in India, the legal position in India, and it is how it is just like disclosure is the basic tenet of patent law, and that is also the legal position in India. Their arguments on inventive step and novelty is disputed in that way.
Yes. So I just wanted to also highlight Sumi Datta's question. Does it mean that civil society organizations are saying that Lenacapavir should not be granted patent in India at all and should be made more accessible to patients through voluntary licenses? Just to highlight that all civil society organizations in India, supported by organizations like ITPC, are against the grant of those patents to Gilead, both on merit, that basically means insufficient disclosure of the compound that would be taken up for industrial application in the Markush claim. Salt forms should not be granted, and of course, one of the key reasons for those patent oppositions is that repeatedly countries like Ukraine, Malaysia, Thailand, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, which just issued the compulsory license on dolutegravir, have been systematically left out of voluntary licenses. And therefore, in solidarity, Indian civil society, even if a voluntary license is granted, would continue to fight these patent claims. Because we want the API to be available to all countries who want to do local production and regional production. We also think that because the new infections are in middle-income countries and outside of sub-Saharan Africa, we think that this drug should reach all low and middle income countries, including upper middle income countries. So if we want to end AIDS and we want to use Lenacapavir as a very effective prevention tool, we can't afford middle income countries to be excluded from voluntary licenses. And that has been the traditional way licenses have operated. Many upper middle income countries who have high infection rates are often left out of voluntary licenses. So the ideal situation for access is no patent is granted in India, allowing both the finished formulation and the API to flow into countries. If a voluntary license is granted, we still think that some producers can operate outside the have the freedom to operate outside of voluntary licenses if the patent is not granted. So in a nutshell, Indian generic companies have greater freedom to operate, to export both the raw material as well as the finished formulation if the patents are not granted in India. So therefore, that's the justification for all 5 applications going under opposition. Yeah. Yes, currently the two, the long-acting injectable Lenacapavir, which is given to a person twice a year, is 44,000 per patient per year. That's also published in Andrew Hill's paper when he did the cost of production, costing of goods paper, and then we can send that to you. Yeah. So what are the grounds of the patent opposition? To repeat, it's there in our press release as well as a briefing document, but to repeat, of all the 5 applications, the Markush claim, which is the main first application, has insufficient disclosure of the compound that will go into industrial application. So that's the first ground for opposition. The salt applications do not merit patenting in India because we know that we have Section 3D. We've seen the Glivec precedent. We've seen the fumarate salt precedent on bedaquiline. The long-acting injectable form is known technology again, applied to a large number of drugs, including, as you know, on bedaquiline. And those applications are already under challenge and formulate some form of prior art for the Lenacapavir long-acting injectable as well. So there are various grounds taken in all 5 applications, and the oppositions are well drafted on technical grounds. And it is a tough fight in the patent office, to be very honest here. The hearings are on 19 September on the salt applications, 2 salt applications. The rest of them are still under examination, just like these 2 are. And we will keep you apprised on any hearings that are held on the other applications as well. Yes. No, Indian generic industry has not submitted any patent oppositions. Has not submitted any patent oppositions to the Indian patent offices, and that's a matter of great concern. And that is why, civil society has filed these patent oppositions. We are concerned that perhaps the HIV producers are all waiting to see who receives a voluntary license, and therefore, do not want to. So out of, the 6 or 7 key players that we have, none of them have filed patent oppositions before the Indian Patent Office. Yes. So we understand that WHO is still waiting for data on trial. So WHO issued a very good statement at the International AIDS Conference. I'll encourage you to take a look at it. At the time when Purpose 1 data was released, they welcome the data from Purpose 1, which showed that it worked as a very important prevention tool for women. They were waiting for Purpose 2 to convene on guidelines and the next steps. An important part is WHO pre-qualification. And yes, Indian manufacturers would first have to file for registration with the Indian CDSCO, the Indian FDA, before they file for WHO pre-qualification. And that's also our concern, that unless we address patent concerns, many Indian manufacturers will not come forward for registration with the Indian FDA. So we are awaiting these developments. Now these developments are likely to start happening on the regulatory front. Now Purpose 2 is available. So Purpose 2 data is going to be used as per Gilead's own statement for regulatory filing for PrEP. And Purpose 2 data, WHO is waiting, according to its statement, to look at talking to experts and convening on guidelines. So we are waiting for those developments to happen, and Purpose 2 data was released this Thursday. Yeah. Any more questions that we can answer at this point? Thanks, Mona. So Mona Mishra, who's well known in the HIV community, is asked, like Eldred is representing the concerns of the drug using community, any other community is represented in the petitions, and I think this is a very important issue. Yes, other communities need to look at these patent applications and how they impact, particularly transgender men who have sex with men, and other communities should also take a look at these patent applications very seriously. And we hope we find more support. Yashwinder is not on this press briefing. He was traveling, and he's been on PrEP for 7 years and has welcomed any questions from the Indian press on the importance of PrEP for men who have sex with men. Yeah. And maybe Mona, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, just
You're
a
welcome.
question. How will people be able to join you, support you? What would be that process?
Absolutely. So one of our big concerns is that the Indian Patent Office has been granting a lot of frivolous patents in the past. And unless patent oppositions are strengthened and supported, often these patent applications go through, even though the Indian patent law is quite strong, based on court decisions as well as patentability guidelines and of course, the law itself. So I think the most important thing is to do greater advocacy for PrEP within the country, with the Indian government, to say that PrEP is a very important tool for HIV prevention, and of course join advocacy efforts to highlight the importance of these oppositions through editorials, through meetings and so on. So I just wanted to say this, that very little progress on PrEP has been made in India's HIV program, and that itself merits a lot of discussion, and we welcome everybody who wants to look at Lenacapavir and the cost of production, which is, as we said, $100 per person per year. One of the big concerns that has come from the HIV program, that these newer long-acting technologies will be very expensive. And we think if anybody can share that the cost of production is very low, we start talking about the importance of PrEP within the country, is also a very important way of highlighting the battle on Lenacapavir access. Yeah.
I'd like to just add there, Leena, that along with TWN, we will be hosting some workshops. So those who are interested in joining or in supporting or taking up such oppositions, they can write into us and we will invite them to these workshops. Coming up, there will be a couple of national workshops. So Mona, if you know someone who is interested and motivated, we'd surely like them to join the gang.
Yeah, Eldred, that is an important thing, because the more opportunities there are for people to have these interactions with you, the better the chances we have of strengthening our opposition. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Yes. So Ganesh has asked any estimates on how many people, actually they're not patients because they're not they're HIV negative, as we say, in the country could benefit from the drug. All people at high risk. So if you look at sex workers and you look at men who have sex with men, the drug using community, all of them stand to benefit. I don't have exact numbers, but perhaps we can come back to you with exact numbers. But we know that India runs, what we call key population interventions, targeted interventions with all vulnerable communities who are at high risk of HIV prevention. All of those would stand to benefit from PrEP, including with Lenacapavir. So I just wanted to highlight all key populations interventions that the HIV program runs in the country. And other countries globally who run interventions with key populations would stand to benefit from providing access to Lenacapavir twice-a-year injections.
Can I add
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
Lena?
please do.
Yeah,
Yes,
just
please
to an
go.
earlier question about voluntary licenses, I think it's important to understand that voluntary licenses may be given in India, but that doesn't solve a problem universally. And a good example is Sofosbuvir, where we were able to get it for less than $100 after getting the voluntary licenses. But there are parts of the world and in the US, it's still sold for $84,000. So that's really scandalous amount that people have to pay. And so it's not just about getting the voluntary licenses in India. We need to make sure that the patent is not given.
So I think one of the big concerns is that India has not been very supportive of regional manufacturing and local manufacturing in other regions of the world. And I think as Indian civil society, we recognize that it's not just about exporting finished formulations, making the raw material available to Latin American countries, Thailand and others who have capacity to produce is an important part of the post-COVID response. There's been a lot of work being done on regional manufacturing, and I just wanted to highlight that challenging the patent to ensure that the raw material is available is an important aspect of these patent oppositions. So Jyoti Datta's companies often bring in drugs at an Indian specific pricing. Is that something you're open to, since the Indian generics appear to have not approached CDSCO? The Indian generics will approach the CDSCO once the data is all available and WHO guidelines are in place. So we are quite positive that once WHO convenes its guidelines and puts out either rapid communications on them and subsequently the guidelines, we will see some regulatory filings happening. On Indian pricing, I would just simply say that we would very much encourage pool procurement, which is basically that it's available through the HIV program, so that a larger number of people are benefited from it, and there's a public health approach. That means there's proper testing of people, and if they're negative, they're offered PrEP. If they're positive, they offer antiretroviral treatment. And very importantly, pool procurement brings down prices tremendously. So, at this point of time, what we are looking at is the inclusion of PrEP and Lenacapavir in public health programs across low and middle income countries. And countries in Africa are doing it as we speak. Malawi and many other countries where Cabelet is being now introduced as PrEP. I just wanted to highlight that we are more interested in pool procurement mechanisms, including of the Indian government through NACO. So the tenders, the guidelines have to be in place, the tenders have to flow so that maximum number of people can benefit, and that depends on how fast WHO convenes in guidelines and what guidance is issued by the WHO. Yeah, so just highlighting that we are all awaiting to see the next steps from WHO.